to give you some additional update on the numbers from yesterday. So to 8 o'clock last night, 15 new cases of COVID-19 were identified in New South Wales. This brings the total number of cases to 3,361. Yesterday we had a record number of tests again. 27,702 tests were done in New South Wales, including almost 3,000 in the southwest Sydney area, which is fantastic. This is higher than the previous record the day before, which was 24,467 tests. We are looking at, of the 15 new cases, a breakdown of those. 4 are in overseas travellers in hotel quarantine. 5 were contacts of people who'd been directly or indirectly to the Crossroads Hotel. 1 was linked to a cluster at the Thai Rock restaurant at the Wetherill Park that was reported yesterday. And 5 cases, including 2 from the same household, remain under investigation, which aren't at this point clearly linked to the other cases. In addition, since those numbers 8 o'clock last night, we've had an additional case linked to the Planet Fitness gym at Casula, bringing those numbers bring the total number of people related to the cluster that began at the Crossroads Hotel to 45. Of the cases reported yesterday, 2 had together visited the bistro at the Soldiers Club in Bateman's Bay on the 13th of July from 7 o'clock to 9:30 p.m, and also McDonald's at Albion Park on the 15th of July from 2 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. So we're asking people who were at the bistro at the Soldiers Club at Bateman's Bay for 2 hours on the 13th of July from between 7 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. To isolate immediately for 14 days after they were last there. Watch out for symptoms, and if symptoms develop, come forward for testing right away. And even if they get a negative test, to stay in isolation for that full 14 days. We're also asking anybody who was at Albion Park McDonald's on the 15th of July between 2 and 2:30 to watch carefully for symptoms, and if they develop any respiratory symptoms, cough, sore throat, runny nose, shortness of breath or fever, to come immediately forward for testing and isolate themselves. And just a reminder of a previous warning about Planet Fitness Gym at Casula, if people were there between the 4th and the 10th of July, to come forward for testing, but self-isolate again for 14 days, regardless of that test result. And if they get a negative test and get further symptoms, to come forward for testing again. We've got a list, a growing list of places that people should review on a regular basis to see whether they've been to those places on a website, to check to remind themselves whether they need to isolate and get tested. So we're at a crucial point in the fight against COVID. It remains a very active number of cases in New South Wales and in Victoria. It's very important that we as a community come together to fight this virus. The things that we all need to do is to maintain social distancing, keep at least 1.5 metres away from other people, avoid crowds, avoid clustering. If you're sick, don't go out, stay at home, don't go on public transport, and importantly, come forward for testing. And it's been really pleasing seeing the number of people who are heeding that call to come forward for testing if they've been at one of these clusters or if they get even the mildest of symptoms. It's important to note that it's not just these clusters we're worried about. With COVID being so active, anywhere in New South Wales, if you have the symptoms, don't hesitate, come forward to one of the COVID clinics, one of the respiratory clinics that the Commonwealth has set up, or through your GP where you can get tested. Don't be shy, come forward for testing, and even if you've been tested before, if symptoms recur, come forward for testing again. It's essential we find you so that we can assist you, but also importantly protect others in the community who you might have exposed, so that we can stop the virus spreading further. On that note, I'd like to introduce again Carolyn Murray, who's head of our contact tracing team, who's been doing an enormous job to directly contact people who might be at risk.
Good morning, everyone. Our contact tracing team that works in the building downstairs has got 180 people on board at the moment across our roster. In the last week, we've contacted over 10,000 people from various clusters across New South Wales. We've built a very strong team across the state, including the public health units, and I'd like to call out to them today about the strength of their work across the state in COVID already. So we're all working together across the network to actually follow up our close contacts.
So any questions?
Is there any link of the Thai restaurant outbreak to the Crossroads at this stage in that genomic testing? Have you found, or is it a completely separate cluster?
Not at this point. They're closely related in geography and time, and so we're continuing to look for potential contacts, but crossovers, but at this point we haven't found that. Doesn't mean there isn't one, it doesn't mean there is any indirect link, which is probably most likely, but we'll continue to look for that.
The initial patient zero was attached to a freight company in Wetherill Park. Have you been able to establish whether him or his colleagues went to that restaurant or went to that cafe, or did they go to the Stockland Mall?
No, we haven't been able to establish any links with the Thai restaurant. A number of people, including people from the freight company, I believe, went to the Stockland Mall. And yesterday we issued advice that if people have been in the Stockland Mall in the last couple of weeks, if you get any symptoms at all, come forward for testing like others.
Do we believe the source of the Thai restaurant was the 30-year-old woman who you initially identified as having COVID and working at the restaurant? Do you believe she's the one who's passed on the virus, or did one of the customers bring the virus?
Yeah, it's a good question. It may be the worker, but we don't know for sure. It may be the worker had infection first, and the customers may have acquired it from there. We are still investigating that. It's sometimes quite hard to know exactly where the first source came from, and at this point we haven't identified. But certainly nobody did anything deliberate, and that's why it's so important that people come forward for testing with the mildest of symptoms.
If you don't mind, the people infected from that restaurant, were they, it appeared, being infected on the same day, or this person worked, I believe, 4 or 5 days over a period?
So there is a common day for the two customers on the 10th of July that we believe they were infected.
With the 5 unconfirmed or under investigation cases, how concerning is that? Do they have any, are they in Sydney Southwest? Do they have any particular links to either of those clusters?
No, at this point we haven't identified links. Sometimes links emerge with further investigation and prompting of people about, when you're asking people about 14 days worth of exposures and a lot of detail about where they went, people can sometimes not remember immediately, and so we often go back to people to jog their memory, and sometimes more details emerge that we can then link together, or we might identify from another case a common link that then comes back to that other case. So it's about painstakingly looking at the evidence, pulling together the threads that emerge from a range of different interviews, and sometimes we're lucky enough to identify those common threads that then create this pathway or chain of events that we can link things to. Now, we're very keen, of course, to make links where we can, because that indicates we've got less cases out there, but we can't assume that. We're at the point where we still haven't made links to all cases, that we're really concerned that we just need to find every case we can, and that's where we really need the public's cooperation to find cases, come forward for testing immediately. If you are in one of those groups who have been identified at high risk and needing to be tested regardless of symptoms, or if you get any symptoms across the state.
And the Bateman's Bay couple, all of them who were found to test positive, having visited that bistro in Bateman's Bay, are they linked to the Crossroads cluster?
At this point, we haven't developed any links with the Crossroads cluster from those two people.
So they're two under investigation?
That's right. Okay. That's right.
Is that part of the 5 that you?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you break up the other 3? Are they all people that lived under the same roof? What's the scenario?
No, of those 5, there are 2 from one household and 3 independent cases.
And what was the other independent case?
They're in different local health districts, so a couple in southwest Sydney, one in the Peel Blue Mountains, remaining under investigation. We're looking for any potential links that might either link those together or link. What we do is go back in time to look at what events they might have been, whether anybody at those events might have been to the crossroads or been linked. So it's a really complex. We've got a whiteboard with lots of lines drawn between clusters of cases. So and we go over that in great detail to look for any potential link between cases. Sometimes it takes a little while with new information emerging that we can draw those links together.
How many from the Planet Fitness gym now with that extra one's there? How many in total?
Yeah, let me just check.
I know that's part of the cluster as well, but...
Yeah. So we now have 6 cases associated with the Planet Fitness gym who all so far have attended on the evening of the 8th of July. So again, that reinforces the importance of people who've been to the Planet Fitness gym to isolate and come forward for testing if they've been in that period from the 4th onwards.
Carolyn, what's your biggest concern with tracing people? Is it that people aren't coming forward, or is it just so hard to go A, B, C and find the source?
To be frank, people are doing a fantastic job in New South Wales. So some of the people we might speak to initially, they've already self-isolated because they've heard of, say, a pub and they've been at that pub, for example. Ostensibly, people are happy to hear from us because we can assist them to self-isolate.
When you see images on the front page of the paper of overcrowding on escalators in shopping centres, we know there are a number of cases connected to the Stockland Mall. What goes through your head as someone that's trying to contact all of these people? Do you just look at those pictures and go, oh my God, if there was to be an outbreak, how difficult that might be?
I think our role as contact tracers in this is to inform people and educate them on the best thing that they can do to look after their health and the health of others. And what we do then is speak to the people, everyone that we speak to about that, and we ensure that they have the right information. I've seen those photos. I don't really make judgments on people in terms of what they're doing, but we certainly do get the word out via the press conferences and via the media of what people need to do. People are clear that they need to stay 1.5 metres apart. They're clear they need to wash their hands, and they're clear they need to go for testing if they're a part of a cluster and or if they have symptoms, if they start to get symptoms.